And now, ladies and gentlemen,
Put your thumbs up and say it's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, Tickety Boo, everything's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, son. Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo.
Welcome to another episode of Tickety Boo. Today we want to talk about why your story matters. You know those stories from your past, the ones you repeat to yourself and everyone else? Well, we all have them. Some of us replay old chapters of hurt, pain or rejection, never realising that the story we're telling shapes who we become. But what if you could rewrite that story? What if your past wasn't something holding you hostage, but something you could actually reshape into your greatest strength? So today we're exploring how changing your narrative can change your life, because you're not just a character, you're the author. So guys, let's jump into it.
Yeah.
Can you think of a story from your life that you used to tell yourself that eventually you had to rewrite?
Yeah. Literally about being an author. I think it was about the age of 13, there was something someone said to my mum, and then she told me, and it's that I just don't finish anything. And it wasn't meant to be a criticism. It's just that I'm very impulsive. I do lots of things. So I started going, oh, well, I don't finish anything. So, oh, well, I didn't finish, like I went to uni, I didn't finish my degree. Well, I don't finish anything. And so that became my narrative. So whatever I did, and it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was a cop-out. So I never finished anything. And then I remember when it was freaking monumental when I actually finished my first book. And it's like, oh, I do finish things. And then actually when I look back, so I think I wrote my first book in 2020. Interestingly, we've been talking a lot about 2020 recently in the episodes. But that was when, I do finish. And then I looked back and realized there were other things I'd done in my life that I had finished, that I had completed. And when you're in business for yourself, you have to complete because you're running a business. But yeah, that was one of the biggest lies I told myself. And then I lived up to it until I changed the story.
Ian?
For me, the one that I've been getting to grips with recently is I'm responsible for everybody else around me. That's something I keep telling myself. It's clearly a response to something that is unresolved in the past. But for years, well, all my life, I've always lived in a place where I felt if people weren't around me, weren't happy, they weren't financially secure, or, for any reason they were suffering, I took on that responsibility and thought the fact that they weren't in a good place was my failure to support them. Ever so strange, but that was.
So you became the fixer in the situation.
Well, that's exactly what it is. My sense of purpose was a fixer. So recently, I've had to stop telling myself that story.
Yeah, I think for me, it was, I need everyone to like me.
Yeah.
Which, it's really interesting. The whole point of this episode is to realise that these narratives that we tell ourselves, what that does to our mental health. So like for me, for everyone to like me, that meant I had to constantly lose myself and dilute myself, which meant I struggled with anxiety. What about you guys? You think, like you were saying about, I don't finish things.
So I use it as an excuse to not finish anything.
So cop out.
Yeah, and looking, I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I did. But oh no, that's just that's just who I am. I made that story, I literally made it my identity.
But how did that make you feel about yourself?
That I think the story, I made it mean that I wouldn't do anything. I wouldn't make an impact. I wouldn't have a legacy because I don't finish anything. How can I have a positive effect on everybody?
Right. Ian? What did it do to your mental health?
Sorry. I was still working.
Did you see that rabbit in the headlights? Look there.
Oh no! I was sitting on the comment when you said that your thing was about everybody liking you. I was saying, stick with it, kid. 40 years, but I'm working on it. So I was trying to sit on my bad dad joke. That's what that was. No, that need to support and prop up everybody else was fine. Normally, it kind of gave me a sense of validation, and it may have felt very noble at the time. But the reality is, when I had stuff of my own to deal with, that I had limited. We all have limited capacity. We're only humans, so I'd then be carrying stress and anxiety that sort of wasn't mine to carry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when do you think this sort of perception and perspective kicks in, when we reflect on these past experiences and you can look back? How important do you think it is to get to that phase?
It's really important. I mean, getting to that phase has hit me in different aspects of my work and professional life. But one of the things here was, the more I was doing things for people, one is it just become expected. Then I started to get frustrated because I was feeling taken for granted. And the other thing is, while I was propping everybody else up, I started to realise a lot, largely through doing this, that they weren't learning the lessons. They were just going back and doing the same thing because I'd be cleaning up the mess for them.
The more you help them, the more they expected you to be there to continue to help.
But the thing was, they clearly weren't learning the lessons that are there to be learned from the situation that they were in. And my noble cause of helping them was actually robbing them of that opportunity to learn. So I've realised that I'm actually doing you no good. That's something that's really hard to recognise with people you care for, especially your kids. You have to let them sort of go through the growing pains.
For parents, that's hard. Allowing our children to make their own mistakes, whatever age they are, so that actually empowers them and they take responsibility for themselves.
Yeah, I think
instead of doing everything for them is what I mean. Yeah,
I see people in the therapy route who you can tell, and it's not a criticism, it's a straight observation. They have made the choice that they're going to continue to live their story. And as much as you try and give them another perspective and remove them from the story, they want to stay in that story.
Well, it's a choice. You assume that that's where they're happy being.
Well, it's their identity. I mean, it was my identity. Exactly. I don't finish anything.
But these stories aren't carved in stone, are they?
No.
They can be tweaked at any time. You can edit them. You can rewrite them. You can change the narrative at any time that you decide to. But a lot of people don't.
Our stories are so powerful because we can actually, for those of you who want to make a difference. So one of my things is I don't finish anything. I can't make an impact. I want to have a purposeful impact on the world. I finished my first book. So then I started to go, okay, well, how can I make my journey, my story more impactful? So by sharing what we're going through and the trials and tribulations we've come through, which I'm very open about in my first book in particular, we then get to empower other people. So some of you may or may not have heard the quotes, turn your pain into your purpose, your mission into your message. So we can make our stories, no matter what they are, something that's impactful and can inspire others, can help others change their predicament, their situation, their story. And just by being open about our journey and where we've held ourselves back.
So your story can definitely inspire people.
Yes.
I think the problem is when you turn your story into your mantra.
Well, a lot of that depends on what your story is. Where's that story from and what's it based on? Is it based on fact or what you've been told?
Because we lie to ourselves all the time too.
Yeah,
exactly.
But here's the scarier question. Who are you without your story?
Oh, that is scary. You're a blank page. Oh, and as exciting as that is, how scary is that when you sort of lose that thing that you're addicted to most?
When you have to step out the story of your anxiety, your trauma, or whatever happened to you in the past, and you deal with that. And who are you?
Now, see, I find that really exciting. It's like blank page. You get to write your own story. You get to start afresh, start again. And sometimes people choose to move to a different place or change things so much where all they're trying to do is change their story, their situation. So we don't have to physically leave necessarily.
I see people come into the therapy room and they are desperate to change their story. They are so up for changing their story, and and you can see it in them. But I also see other people come in that I can just see it straight away. They don't want to change. They are so wrapped up in the narrative that I have to call them out on it. But you know what? sometimes I think you have to call BS on stuff and say,
Well, sometimes it's about understanding where your story come from. Going back to the therapy room, there was one case I've spoken to you about, which was a lady that comes in, wonderful woman, and she's come back over to me. It was about she's attracted to men that are emotionally unavailable.
Mm.
And the story that she would tell herself is, I only get men that don't want me. And guess what she chased?
Men that didn't want her.
and that was all she saw on her radar. And it was about helping her understand why that was.
Thoughts become things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's true. And it's the difference between victimhood and empowerment. It's just the shift in the story you tell yourself.
Yeah. I would say definitely the people that I work with has changed, and that was also a conscious effort for me, because I wanted to work with people who are ready to change and have that empowerment story. So turning that into, right, okay, what are the changes you're going to make in your life? Like, how do you want to be remembered? Like, do you want to be remembered for the person, the old me, who never finished anything? Or do you want to be remembered for the person who is changing lives, who is impacting, who is having that ripple effect? And that to me is just so freaking juicy and magical.
Mm.
Yeah, I agree. Well, whoever remembers the things that you very nearly done but didn't quite do, they remember what you did.
Yeah.
Well, the stats are there that if you separate your story from your identity, that 80% more people will overcome the emotional difficulties from those stories.
Mm.
You've got to separate the two things. You are not your story.
Yeah.
That's, I think, where people get stuck. You can choose to be the story, but you can also choose not to be the story. Your story is not necessarily your identity.
Yeah.
Unless you choose it to be. And that's it. If you're consistently telling yourself that bad story, neuroplasticity kicks in and your brain changes and you become things. The thoughts become things.
Mm.
So somebody that was bullied for years, and the narrative in their mind is of someone who's powerless. They don't have resilience. They feel like there's someone that's overlooked. But that doesn't have to be the narrative. That can change.
Yeah.
Separate the identity.
Yeah, and also with that story, they can have an impact. Talking about bullying, getting involved in anti-bullying campaigns, have your story like, yeah, I went through this, so therefore. So as I said, turning your pain into your purpose. Like, there's so many amazing ways we can work with the stories that we may feel have been put upon us because of situations or circumstances that were out with our control. But yeah, we have the power to change our story.
Yeah, the story's not a prison.
Yeah.
No.
You can break out of it. And here's the thing. Most of the stories were written for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It's like the caregiver when you were younger, or the environment when you were told where you were led to believe that you were never quite good enough to be. I can't be a doctor. I'm not intelligent enough, or I'm intelligent but I have no common sense. All those things that. It's other people's stories that they've unloaded on you, but you've adopted somehow. And where do you find your own full potential? If generally you're following somebody else's story, or you become a character in a book that somebody else has written. It's kind of like measuring yourself with somebody else's ruler. It just doesn't.
I think the hard thing a lot of people struggle with is it's not so much what happened to you, not taking away what happened to you, but it's how you choose to respond to it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Most of the stuff, there's nothing that can be done about what's happened or should have happened or didn't happen. But you do have that choice over how you respond.
Yeah. And there's so many lessons in the stories we've been through. There's a really great positive psychology exercise where it's literally called What's Your Story? And you can get a sheet of paper and you can just mark off like pivotal moments in your life, let's say from 0 to whatever age you are now, just little notes, but you're going to write about the peaks and the lows, so you get to see like on some of the episodes we've just talked about resilience, we've talked about triggers. So we can look at some of the things we've overcome, but then also you can look at the peak moments. What were they? And looking at your story like laid out in front of you like that can be really powerful and insightful. You can see some patterns that you've been repeating, or you might go, oh my gosh, look at all this amazing like stuff I've overcome. Look how resilient I am. Look at what I've done. It can be a really great reframe just to look at your your lifespan. Not so that it doesn't have to flash up at the end of your life, but to explore your own story is really fascinating.
Yeah, agreed. I think you've got to start off by asking yourself, is my story helping me now? Or is it time that I start to rewrite it?
What do I want this story to be?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And reframe what's happened to you with some kind of level of compassion.
Yes.
That is, that's got to be the new narrative. Your story right now is shaping your reality, and that story is either empowering you or it's keeping you anchored in the past.
Yeah,
and that's a choice. If your story, if you think of your life as a book, past hurts are chapters that are already written, and you can't erase those pages. But you hold the pen, and every day further forwards is a fresh blank page. So what story do you want to write next? People, when I talk to people in the therapy room, sometimes it's almost like you make it sound a little bit too simple, and they get a bit cheesed off with you. As though you're like, how dare you take away the severity of my story? And it's not that at all. It's certainly not that. It's not about taking away what happened to you. But I think, like right now, the listeners to this episode, we're inviting them to think about their stories.
And what are you choosing?
And what are you choosing? And are you feeling stuck?
Yeah. And why do you believe that story is true? So often there's a memory, or there's an emotion attached to a memory that is keeping people anchored to that thought. So one of the first things we do is we collapse that emotion and that memory, and sort of, and then all of a sudden you see their eyes and go, "Wow, you're a magician."
It's nice in therapy, isn't it? Because it's almost like we get to throw a plot twist into the story, and we can
the best kind.
And we can literally get them to spin and go off in a different direction. I've seen people come on the training courses and in therapy, and like, you literally don't recognize that person anymore. They are totally different, and that is a choice. But people watch them and go, oh, it's all right for them. It's not all right for them. They've had to do some hard work. They've had to they've had to take big, long, hard looks at versions of themselves in the mirror and face their demons, rather than running away from everything in their life and completing the narrative.
We're quite lucky, because when people do come to see us for therapy, they have lived with the pain and with that story for a long, long time. And when they come to us, they're at threshold. They're at the point where they need that change, and they're ready to write a new story in a different way.
If you're not ready, if you haven't reached that threshold, there's no incentive to step outside the story. People around you might be completely exhausted by your story, but until you have had enough of that story, until you're ready to step out and make changes, nothing can change.
A slightly light-hearted one, it's like my younger brother. Absolutely love him to bits, but his thing is, I'm always late. And he's literally told himself he's always late. So it's become acceptable to always be late and always be disorganised. And it drives everybody else crackers. When you're sitting his kids or whatever, or he forgets to pick the kids up from school, so one of us has to dash across town to get him. And it's his story he's told himself for so long. And it's actually become acceptable, because it's not. It's like you were saying, for people around you, it becomes exhausting.
Stop trying to drag people around you into your story so you can feel better about your story.
Yeah, because you've told yourself, you believe it, and you've told yourself that story for so long, it's acceptable. And it's okay. But sometimes it's the story, it's not cool. It's not.
But it's like what you said. when you step outside the story, or who are you without your story? And so a lot of people, that creates a lot of fear. You said, well, that actually creates excitement. What about, just for a moment, just listeners to this, think about the best chapters of their life have yet to be written.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How much time have they wasted stuck in the story? Life could be absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And you get to rewrite the chapters. That's the key thing with this. It's empower yourself.
That's it. I mean, I call it waking up, especially with some of the older guys that I get coming through the therapy room. I call it the process of waking up, where they've been stuck in this negative loop, this story they've told themselves. It's like a negative loop that replays and replays and replays. And every relationship they have, they break it down. This is specific. Sorry. So they're just almost going to a state of self-destruct, whether it was in a relationship or with themselves, when their life started to deviate in a way that was taking them outside of the narrative. And they're going to self-destruct, or they'd ruin a good relationship with them, which they'd then spend time regretting afterwards. And getting them out of that negative loop, getting them to change the story, it's incredible when they do go through that waking up phase, and they can realise that they can change the future, and it's different. It's liberating. It's one of the most liberating things you can do.
Yeah.
To realise that, you know what, I'm not living by a script that I didn't write anymore.
Yeah.
Or, it was written for me.
You can be the author of your own story, and it can be a much better story.
Choose your own ending. Remember those books where you got to choose the next bit?
Yes.
So there you go.
Absolutely.
I can't remember what they're called.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this, start to become aware of the stories that you tell yourself. And if it's not a story of empowerment, maybe it's time to start to show yourself a bit of compassion and start to rewrite that story, because the next few chapters could be the most amazing chapters of your life. And that brings an end to this episode of Tickety Boo. If you're watching us on YouTube, please click that bell icon. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple, please subscribe so you can follow us and be notified of future episodes. And until the next time, thanks very much for listening.
If you or someone close to you needs to access mental health support, please contact your GP, or if it's out with normal office hours, get in touch with NHS 24 on 111. Alternatively, contact the Samaritans on 116 123. All calls are free of charge from any phone. You can also find more support information on the Tickety Boo website, ticketyboopodcast.co.uk.